我一直以为，如果我不去烦别人，就不会有人注意我，也不会有人伤害我。直到今天我才知道，不是这样的。
病毒不会降低他们想象力，反而会让他们想出最可怕的行为。
我找到你了。
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Fresh Cuts. This is Mike, and joining me as always, it's Mr. Venom. What is up, Venom? How are you?
Greetings and salutations, you happy people. I'm doing pretty well, Mike. How the hell are you?
I'm doing pretty well, keeping the tears to a minimum, so hopefully I don't go crazy through the course of this discussion. All right, joining us as well, it's Dawn. How are you doing, Dawn?
Yeah, great to be back as a threesome. Although I miss Derek, it's great to hang out with you guys.
Cool. Yeah. I have a feeling Derek will probably be joining us like semi-frequently just because it seems like it's a time that usually works for him. Sucks that he couldn't join us for probably one of the better ones, right? But that's I guess a preview for my general thoughts, but we are talking about The Sadness tonight. This is one that pretty much everyone I know has been looking forward to since last year sometime, just depending on who saw the trailer when or has more inside tracks to festival screenings, but it was kind of out there. Yep, that'd be Dawn. So some people had seen it as far back as then, but for the rest of us, it was like, oh, there's a trailer. When's it going to release? And then it fortunately got a German release, and it was available on the German Amazon. So myself and Venom both picked it up, as well as a bunch of other people. And then wouldn't you know it, like almost instantly after I made that order, all of a sudden I got the official release date on Shudder. I still don't regret buying it. You'll find out why soon. But I just thought it was like impeccable timing. But it did release on Shudder this past week. So we kind of made the decision that since that's like the official release date for America, or at least wide enough scope that almost anyone can see it if they want with a Shudder subscription, we figured it'd be best to just cover it on that weekend instead of like when we got our physical copies a few weeks ago now, I think. So yeah, that's a little background on The Sadness, and I'm sure the listeners, you've probably heard something about this. Probably varies, but yeah. The synopsis I will take off IMDb, pretty short and sweet. A young couple trying to reunite amid a city ravaged by a plague that turns its victims into deranged, bloodthirsty sadists. Short, sweet, and
Actually accurate after last week.
Yeah, pretty accurate. So what does this all mean for what we thought of the movie? Well, let's find out, starting with Venom. What are your general thoughts on The Sadness?
All right, my friends. Almost every year, a movie comes out that makes me glad that I'm a horror fan, that literally checks off every box that I'm looking for in a particular subgenre or just in horror in general. My friends, in 2022, that movie is The Sadness. This movie is a fucking joy. I had an ear-to-ear grin, very much emulating our antagonist in the film, but I had an ear-to-ear grin from beginning to end in this film. As Mike mentioned, we picked up the German 4K early, and I've already watched it about a half dozen times. I'm actually watching it right now as we discuss the movie. Yes, I've become that much of a fan. This movie is just gleefully violent. It is joyously gory. I mean, I'm not sure what the proper adjectives are really going to be to properly describe this movie, because it's just it's an absolute experience. And considering VFW was my favorite movie of 2020, it makes absolute sense that this is my favorite movie thus far in 2022, because both movies kind of share the gleeful, violent aesthetic, the over-the-top violence. That's about all they share, obviously, for those that have seen VFW. But like I said, this movie is just so beautifully gory. The set pieces are all stellar. It's so well shot. Not just the scenes of violence, too. Like there's some beautiful symbolism in this film, some iconography that really, really stays with you. I mean, the first time that you see a baby carriage filled with guts that looks like it could equal a human baby, that's a powerful image. I mean, yeah, it's in a horror film, and we can just kind of bypass it and not think about it, but that's a taboo that a lot of films don't really go after. The killing of children, the killing of very young people. And even though we don't actually see any baby violence necessarily, some of the iconography in here is just so powerful. Beautiful cinematography, a great score. I mean, just a near flawless score. It does exactly what it's supposed to do when it's supposed to do it. What can I say about the kills? Just as I've already said, gleefully violent. Just this is a movie that would worry the older generation, knowing that I absolutely adore this film, because it's just it is so disturbingly subversive at times. The movie is not very long. We're looking at an hour and 40 minutes, and it does not take long at all to get to it. I mean, we see our first infected in the first 5 minutes. There's not any action necessarily in that scene, but we do see our first infected victim just kind of standing and staring at one of our protagonists. And it instantly just sets such a tone. Just tension that you can cut with a knife. Sorry to use a terribly old cliche, but I mean, on the 6th or 7th watch of this movie, I am still sitting on the edge of my seat watching this film. Not like I don't know what's about to happen at this point, but just I get this shit-eating grin when some of my favorite scenes are about to come up, when I know the scenes are coming. I mean, we all do it with our favorite movies, our favorite classic movies. This is a movie that just came out for us in America this year. And like I said, I've already watched it about a half dozen times. I'm pretty sure I'm going to watch it a half dozen more before this month is out. And then, of course, end of the year watches. I'll find a reason to watch this 2 or 3 more times before the year is over. But yeah, I'm going to cut my general thoughts short, because I could talk about this movie for fucking hours, and I'm pretty sure we will. So fasten your seatbelt, folks. You're in for a long one. But yeah, I'm just going to cut it off here and say this is, by a goddamn mile, my favorite movie of 2022. Nothing is even close. My second favorite movie feels like it's head and shoulders below The Sadness, even though my second favorite movie is, what many people would call elevated horror, foreign, very well shot, very well made, blah, blah, blah. But it still just pales in comparison to the absolute just comfort food that is The Sadness. And if you can watch this movie and walk away from it smiling and exhilarated, then my friends, you are one of my people, and I love you. So I'm going to leave it at that and just say this fucking movie is an experience and must be watched by all genre fans. I'm not saying you're all going to love it, mind you. There's going to be a large section of the community that doesn't like it. Either it's too violent, or maybe we're hyping it up too much. Because don't forget, as Mike said, some of us have already seen it for months, and I've been hyping it up. I've been talking a lot about it, and I've already heard from podcasters that have watched it since its Shudder release, saying that they are actually disappointed that, some of us may have overhyped it. And if I'm guilty of that, I truly apologize. but I don't care. I'm dying on this hill. I fucking love this movie. It is just an absolute experience. And like I said, I think I'm going to watch it as soon as we're done recording this episode again, because I'm watching it right now, but without audio, just to make sure I don't miss anything during our walkthrough later. But yeah, this fucking movie. Holy shit. I'm going to leave it at that, Mike.
All right. Well, where you're leaving it, let's see if Dawn picks it up. So, what are your general thoughts, Dawn, on the sadness?
Oh, I'm gonna pick it up. I'm gonna shove my dick straight in its eye hole, and I'm gonna caress it until it's. I'm gonna caress it until the blood dries on my dick.
I love it. Folks, if you haven't seen the movie, you might actually think Don's a sick fuck, but trust me, it's coming from somewhere.
Yeah, I was saying this as soon as the film premiered last year at Fantasia, where I was lucky enough to see it. In 2030, when we analyze the films of the past decade and where the genre has stood since then, this is the movie you're going to have to beat between now and then. I'm dying on this hill just like Venom. This is not just my favorite film of the year. This is my favorite film of the decade, because I don't know if anything's going to top this. Wow. I mean, this is one of the most relentless, unforgiving, just absolutely unflinching genre experiences I've seen, probably since the original Evil Dead, when I first saw that one. And that thing won me over just as much as this thing did, by being just as ferocious and relentless as this one gets. And as Venom said, it's immediate, it's nonstop. I mean, this is pretty much just, you're dropped in, you get to know these two characters' names, and then shit hits the fan from there. And where this thing goes, I mean, the onslaught of violence that erupts in this movie, I don't know if there was enough blood left in me to finish my erection when I was done, but I mean, holy shit, this thing just, it just keeps going. And I mean, if you've seen, if the only experience you have from the film is that red band trailer that premiered on YouTube, trust me when I say that's not even a quarter of what goes on in this thing. And my earlier description is going to be pretty much as far as what happens, because I mean, I almost don't even want to say it, but there is an honest to God, or I should say honest to Satan, legitimate skull fucking in this movie, and it's not the most brutal act that happens to a person.
No, it is not. Oh, God.
There is an actual legitimate skull fucking in this movie. And
oh, God.
That is not the most brutal act inflicted upon a human being. I cannot describe enough how joyful I was to watch a scene like that, and to note that that was at the end of what's gone on before, because it culminates this cacophony of this escalation of violence and gore that I haven't seen since, Evil Dead, or, Dead Alive, or Prometheus, or any of the other gore classics that we've all cherished and loved for decades now. And I'm putting it into this category because I think that's where we're going to put it in its place soon enough. We're going to put it up there alongside those names and laud it as one of the greatest genre experiences of our time, because I don't know about you guys, after seeing it once, this thing made my top 10 of the year. Not just top 10 of the year, but this is in my top 10 of all time. And repeat viewings have only cemented that feeling. And Rob, my good man, you've won a fan for life. And I'm proud to say you're a Facebook friend. I can't wait to see where this goes from here, because I'm following your career, my man. I don't care what you do. Your aces in my book, and I want to see where you go from here, because this thing is just a journey that I feel so honored to have seen, and it's just so immaculate and so wonderfully shot. Because the one thing Venom pointed on that very few people talk about, the technicality in this film is astounding. I mean, the shots are just beautiful, not just taking in, the explosion of violence and gore and these just geysers that erupt. But there's beautiful shots in here, and you don't really notice it, but then as soon as you start paying attention to it, they hit you like a brick wall, almost as much as the rest of the violence. And then you top in this incredibly topical storyline that I don't know where the hell he got all of his insights in, but this thing just feels so topical and so on point and what's going on in the world. It's a gore film with smarts, and it's a gore film that has more going on behind the scenes than you realize, and that's a dangerous thing for some people. For others, like me and Venom so far, I think it's going to drain our balls and make us shriveling putrid piles worse than the people left in this film once it's over. But God damn it, I am so glad that I had that experience. So since I've been praising this film now for several months, I'm just glad to finally have other people to know that I wasn't just talking out my ass. So I guess my general thoughts is, I told you so, and thank God I was.
It does feel good, though, when you're right about something. And yeah, it cannot be denied that you were 100% right about this movie. And you know what? Top 10 all time. I can't actually argue that. I mean, I would have to. It's funny, too, because we're all in the process of doing our top 100s for another podcast that's going to be doing a listener top 100. I don't know where I'm going to put the sadness. Like, I mean, it's a given. It's going to be in there. But, I try not to let movies like this affect like the way I look at my all-time list, because it happens every year where one or two movies will come out and it just resonates with you so much that you just want to declare it one of your favorite movies ever. But I like to let movies sit with me for a little bit. As I've said, I've already watched this about a half dozen times, so I think I'm right there with Don. If I really sat down and thought about it, I mean, between its gore, its beautiful practical effects, the masterful filmmaking that at hand here. I mean, like I said, it's not just about the violence and the gore. This is a legitimately incredibly well-made film. So yeah, sorry to interrupt, Mike, but let's let Mike go before I what do you call it? Stroke this movie's ego anymore.
All right. So yeah, I like this movie a lot. It's probably I'm trying to think. I think it's probably sitting at my favorite of the year. If not, it's like at least in consideration so far. It's just nice. Finally, a movie lives up to the expectations, or I guess the excitement I had for it. When that Red Band trailer came out. I mean, I wouldn't say at that point it was a guarantee I was gonna love it, but I was like, okay, unless the trailer's taking every bit of violence that's in the movie and there's nothing else but the trailer, I was like, I don't see how I'm not gonna like it. But even that, I liked it so much more. It's a pretty quick watch. It has lots of rewatch value, because once it goes, it just goes. The setup's not very long. I mean, you get just what you need to know to set the table for the movie, and it's kind of off to the races and doesn't really let up. And it's not just the violence alone, but it's kind of like some dark things. There's some dark reveals along the way as far as like what some survivors kind of different decisions people have made along the way. And because of the situation, you kind of relate it to everything that was going on in the pandemic that we're not quite out of yet. Now, obviously, this is more of a fictionalized, ultra extreme type of virus that's taken over. I don't know if it's the country or world. I can't remember what the news reports in the movie said, but let's just say it's the immediate area where all the people live in the movie. But there's many relatable things in the early stages of it that we can probably recognize, and it almost kind of scares you, because it feels like in real life, when it comes to like COVID and all that shit, regardless of like your personal thoughts on it, we probably, as mankind species, we probably dodged a bullet that it wasn't something more deadly, because if by some chance it was deadly, I think it could have been a lot more devastating, just because of all the responses all across the board. But so when you watch a movie like this, it just kind of puts it into perspective, as far as how horribly things could have gone. So I guess there's always something to be glad that you aren't personally going through, because man, how many of us would be goners pretty much instantly? And the way it's just rapidly spread in this movie is pretty frightening too. It's pretty much no one's safe anywhere at any time, really. I know prior to me even seeing it, just when I think I first saw the trailer, or even before that, people were comparing it to the comic Crossed. I do see a similarity. I do have the first trade of Crossed, and there are some similarities, but I mean, really, if you think about it, it's art imitating life. So you have to expect a lot of these types of movies related to this subject material. So I think it's probably more along those lines of why a movie like this is happening. At the Rue Morgue watch party last week, someone did bring that up, and I can't remember what the director, his full answer was. He did say he was aware, I think, of Cross, but he named off some other influences and stuff, and it all made sense. It was a valid, justified answer to me. And I think the music in this is really good too. Even those opening credits, we kind of get our little our biology
virus,
the mutating virus, and then it just cuts into the synth sound as the title comes up, and then the closing credits was a death metal song or something. Do you know the band by chance?
I don't offhand. I'll try to find it while we're recording.
I can do that. Give me one
All right.
second.
Well, while you guys do that, I'll just say, it's a pretty flawless movie, and it's very trimmed down. It doesn't feel like there's much at all wasted in this movie. It's only what is it, an hour?
Hour 40.
Is it?
Yeah,
40.
yeah. I think everything the credits start rolling like 1:35 or something, but yeah,
Okay.
I think by the time everything's over, it's 1:40.
Nice. Okay. But other than that, it's highly recommended if you're into ultra violent Asian cinema. This should be right up your alley. It to me, this feels almost like a renaissance of the type of stuff that got me into Asian cinema in the first place. And there's always going to be those detractors out there, because I can already see it now. People watching this and be like, oh, I've seen more violent, and of course you could say that about any movie you watch. Oh, well, I've seen something even more violent. Well, okay, that's not the point. it's plenty ultraviolet violent, and it's plenty good. And I could see why people wouldn't like it as much as us, maybe. But man, if this is your type of movie, this to me is it hits all the marks. So I'll leave it at that.
The song during the closing credits is by the band aaaaand, and the song is Crying City. So yeah, death metal, European death metal.
Cool.
But yeah, I mean, this movie does so much right. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about the gore and the kills and everything in this film, but there are so many little touches that I absolutely love about this. The fact that the virus kicks in really, really fast, very, very similar to 28 Days Later. The fact that the fact that the infected are smiling the entire fucking time, they're literally enjoying every second of what they're doing. And to an extent they are, once we get kind of the reveal of how the virus works. To an extent that does kind of make sense. But my friends, if you think having a horde of angry, murderous rage virus 28 days later type characters chasing you, imagine that, but with all of them giggling as they chase you. I'm sorry, but to me that's fucking off-putting. That just it sets me off. And It kind of reminds me, there was I don't know if you guys, how into first person shooters you guys are, but there's an old first person shooter on the old PlayStation called Serious Sam. And in that game, there was a character, there was a villain, an enemy in the game that you could hear giggle before you actually saw them on screen. And it was fucking terrifying if you were playing the game in surround sound. This is what that reminds me of. Listening to these, antagonists as they chase their victims, laughing with these shit-eating grins that just are, so. It reminds me of Happy Puppet Syndrome. And if you guys are not familiar with Happy Puppet Syndrome, I would strongly recommend you do not look it up. Because some of the images of people that actually have Happy Puppet Syndrome, it's fucking heartbreaking. And it's going to remind you of the antagonist in this film. So, I mean, if you have any sympathy for humanity in any way, I would not look that condition up. But if you're a sadistic bastard like Don and myself, go ahead and check it out and look at some of the images and tell me that doesn't look like some of the antagonists from our film today. Not the eyes, obviously, not the blacked out eyes, but the smile, the constant sweat and drool. I mean, it's fucking terrifying. And not only that, the infected still talk. They're still speaking, and the absolute bile that's coming out of their mouth is like, it's equal parts cringeworthy and exhilarating to hear these fucking words come out of these, and these are, Taiwanese people, usually very prim and proper, and they're talking about the awful shit that they're going to do to their victims as they're stalking them, especially when they're chasing or stalking a female victim. All the just absolute subversive psychosexual shit that they're talking about, what they're going to do to them when they catch them. That's almost more vile than what they actually do when they get them. Just hearing them talk. It worked so much for me that I just can't. I can barely put it into words. So goddamn terrifying. And then the multiple incredible set pieces in this movie. The train scene. That's all you have to say. The train car scene. Holy shit. We're going to be talking about this scene for decades after this. This scene, and it's a long scene. It's not like a quickie 2-3 minute scene. No, my friends, we're talking like 10 to 12 minutes of just ultra violence in an enclosed space. I hope I'm giving the movie justice with the words I'm choosing to describe it, because I feel like I'm going to fall short regardless of what I say. But then there's going to be people that say that I overhyped it, and that's just as valid, depending on how you look at this film. But so many elements of this just work. I mean, I literally sat here last night trying to think of something negative to say. Literally anything negative to say about this movie. My friends, I can't think of one. I cannot think of one. Not the pacing, not the editing, cinematography, dialogue, performances. There's nothing I can nitpick. And which obviously that kind of makes it a 10 out of 10 for me. I mean, if I'm trying to find something negative to say and I can't find anything, I mean, what else is there? Just the gleeful blood spray throughout this film, the massive attacks of just stabbing an individual 40 times with a goddamn smile on your face. Yeah, this movie is fucking haunting, exhilarating, cringy, boner-inducing, as Don would say, and I will happily agree with that one, because if you're a gorehound, this is basically porn. I mean, there's no other way to put it. If you like gory horror films, this is our porn, my friends. Right here, we don't have to hide it. We don't have to put it in a folder to hide it from our wives. Shit, I have it right next to Sleeping Beauty in my goddamn DVD collection. It's literally Sadness, Sleeping Beauty, and I'm never going to move it. I want it there like that forever. So I just... Like I said, we're going to sit here and just fillet this movie for a couple of hours. And I'm going to try really hard to be objective. I'm trying to be objective, but it's so hard when you watch something. And it's happened to all of us. We've all seen a movie that just resonates with us on like a cosmic level. And this movie is that for me. I mean, I would have paid $100 for this movie. To get it a month before it came out on Shudder, I would have paid $100, $200, potentially $300. I don't care. That's how much I love this movie. On top of the fact that, by the way, the steel book that the German version comes with is fucking awesome. Yeah, we've got our businessman on the cover with his axe. Just absolutely stellar.
I swear to God, whoever that guy is, Rob, wherever you found him, kudos, man. That guy is an absolute icon.
Yeah, and he's only credited as businessman, so his character actually didn't have a name. So we're gonna be calling him the businessman throughout the movie, and I kind of like that actually. I tend to not always be great with names, especially a movie that has a lot of characters. This one doesn't have a lot, but I mean we meet a lot of people that end up getting dispatched fairly quickly, and that can tend to kind of confuse who's who, especially when you're watching a foreign film. When everybody's not named Michael and Johnny, it makes it a little bit. At least our main character is named Jim, so that makes it easy. At least I appreciate that. Jim and Kat, nice and easy to remember. But yeah, I don't know, guys. Anything else you want to say before we get into spoilers? Because I am looking forward to this.
I'm good. I'm trying to save my load here.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to touch myself, but it's really hard. Literally.
Same. Yeah, me too.
Literally and figuratively, my friends, it's hard. Mike, anything else you want to add before we jump into the spoilers?
Nope, I'm good.
Oh, man. All right, friends. I'm going to try to be somewhat lively with this walkthrough and not take 20 minutes to discuss every single goddamn scene, but mind you, I could. I'm pretty sure Don and I could do a 5-hour episode on this movie easily without taking a break, but I'm going to try not to subject you guys to all of this, especially since if you're still with us, you've already seen the film or you don't care about the film and you just kind of want to hear some of the plot points. So I'll try to be quick and not as loving as I'd like to be. So, as Mike mentioned, our movie opens with this cool little CG opening credits sequence showing some bacteria strains, in the bloodstream. We see them start to mutate, and then we see one of them explode, literally explode, and then that turns into the title card, of course, the sadness with that great dark synth sting as the title appears on screen. After that, we are introduced to Jim and Kat. They are a young couple living together in Taiwan. They are young professionals, and they get into a little bit of a discussion where they had a vacation planned for the following week. Unfortunately, Jim took a job. It looks like it looks like Jim is some kind of filmmaker or, has something to do with production. And he basically takes work whenever it comes. And he took this job even though he knew he kind of tried to play that he forgot that they were going on vacation the following week. But I think it's pretty obvious he didn't forget. He just was hoping to avoid this conversation. Of course, Kat is disappointed. She feels kind of minimized because, it's difficult. She talks about how difficult it is for her to get time off, and she got an entire week off to be with Jim, and now he's canceling the plans, which, kind of fucks Kat over. So, for a little bit, I'm starting to think that Jim is going to turn into that stereotypical horror douchebag spouse. Luckily, he does not. We just get that little bit there of that misunderstanding, and you're kind of mad at Jim for a little bit, but it kind of goes away as soon as the shit hits the fan. Then we're introduced to the neighbor, Mr. Lin, very briefly. We have Jim go out into his patio, and Mr. Lin is there taking care of his garden. And he notices that Mr. Lin looks sick, like his eyes are kind of red and puffy. And Mr. Lin claims, oh, it's just a cold, no big deal. And then this is where we start to get a little topical, where Mr. Lin starts talking about, oh, this whole virus pandemic thing that they're talking about, it's just a giant hoax. It's no big deal. And just instantly I'm like, wow, they have Republicans in Taiwan. How cool. Okay. So yeah, Mr. Lin obviously is, older generation and very skeptical of what the government does and says. I would imagine in China Taiwan, under the rule of China, they probably see it even worse than we do. And while Jim is out on the patio, he looks across the way to another building and he sees an old woman just standing there, staring out into the horizon, not looking at Jim, just looking in the opposite direction. It's obviously a very old woman, long gray hair. She looks like she's wearing like a nightgown, that older women wear. And he tries to get her attention, thinking that she might need some help or something. And when she turns around, we see that she actually has blood on the front of her. And she smiles at Jim, and her teeth are just all jacked up. I'm not sure if this is an effect of the virus or if this woman just didn't take care of her teeth. I think it is the virus, because there's multiple people in the movie that later on we see with jacked up teeth, and some of them are young. I can't imagine young people would have teeth that fucked up that early in their lives. So it seems like the virus is kind of doing more than mutating their minds. It seems like it might be doing something there to their body too. Not that we get any confirmation of that. This is just one man's opinion. And then at that point, Jim gets distracted by Kat, and when he turns back around, the old woman is gone. He doesn't really think too much of it. He says goodbye to Mr. Lin for the morning, and him and Kat are off to work. Now, while they're on Jim's moped or motorcycle, I don't really want to call it a motorcycle, but while they're on his bike, we actually get some really cool shots throughout the city. And there's one particular shot here that I really, really wanted to point out because I think it's fucking masterful. You hear people say a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, this movie has many pictures in it that are worth 1,000 words. And one of them, it's really cool because the scene is in slow motion. And what we're seeing is Jim and Kat drive by a scene that's involving police. And what we see, so the camera is panning side to side. We see a house in the background, no big deal, nothing's happening. Then we see the front of a cop car. Okay, there's cops in the area. Then as the camera pans, we see that the lights are on the car. So obviously, something more serious is happening. Then as the camera continues to pan, we see the police holding a middle-aged gentleman up against the hood of the car, basically holding him down to arrest him. He's, of course, smiling. He's got a shit-eating grin on his face, and he's got blood all over him. As the camera continues to pan, we see the police kind of comforting an even older gentleman. And we see a woman about the same age as the person being arrested, and she's also covered with blood, but she's not attacking anyone so much as it's almost like she's trying to make sure the cops don't kill him. Like, because she's being held back by one cop while another cop is holding this man, I'm assuming her husband, against the door. And then the camera continues to pan, and then we see the gurney. There's a gurney with a sheet over it, and under the sheet is literally just a mound of bleeding flesh. Like, literally, the blood stain on the sheet is in the shape of a human. So this person under the sheet is completely ravaged. We see other members of the family just crying, and then Jim and Kat just continue driving. But that one shot, it's one single shot that goes across. It tells an entire fucking story, and I love that. The story of this little family who we never see again in the film, but it's like we get this little mini movie of what is going on in their house. And that's some of the masterful filmmaking I'm talking about in this film. This movie is just so well made. I'm not going to even be able to put it into words how well made this is. But so anyway, at this point, Jim drops off Kat at home. He apologizes for the vacation the following week. He promises to make up for it. And he goes on his merry way. And after he drops Kat off at work, or at the subway, I should say, after he drops her off at the subway so that she can then take her train to work, Jim goes to a little local restaurant, a little local eatery, one of those little places with like 5 or 6 tables inside. And he orders a cup of coffee, and unfortunately, the person behind the counter is taking care of another customer, so he has to wait for his coffee. He does it politely, no problem. But while he's sitting there waiting, and this is another beautiful fucking shot that I love. Jim is standing in front of the counter looking forward with the camera in front of him. And what we see in the background is the same old woman that we saw him staring at in the opening scene walk behind him, not even acknowledging him. Like, she doesn't even turn her head to look at him. She just walks right by him like a fucking zombie. I love this shot. This shot was so nice. And of course, at that point, we see that the old woman is very tore up. She ends up attacking one of the patrons. She actually spits in his face. That's literally the first attack in this film, is she spits in one of these guys' faces. After she spits in his face, you see him start to writhe. So obviously, she's consciously trying to spread the virus. And Jim sees all of this happening, and suddenly the guy that the woman spit on starts attacking his friend. They were both sitting at the table eating lunch. He attacks his friend, and I mean violently. Like, he takes a butter knife off the table and literally just starts stabbing his friend over and over and over and over and over. I mean, it was literally 20 to 30 times, just stab, 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 stab. And while this is happening, the old woman grabs the guy behind the counter, the guy who was taking care of the orders for the restaurant. She ends up grabbing the basket of fry oil, and apparently the oil that they use in Taiwan is much thicker than the oil that we use here, because it even looked weird while it was frying. It doesn't bubble as much as a deep fryer here in America. But she grabs the basket of fries and literally pours it with a bunch of oil, because this oil is so thick. She was able to get like half a basket full of oil and dumps it on this guy and just starts rubbing the sides of his head and peeling flesh off the goddamn... Folks, this is the first kill in the goddamn movie, and we're already getting a melting face. And it looks fucking amazing. I can't get over it. Obviously, the scene devolves in the restaurant. As people start getting infected, they go ahead and attack the uninfected. The old woman notices Jim try to leave the restaurant, and she gives chase, but obviously she's an old woman. Like, you know, these zombies, they are runners if they're young. If they were runners in life, they're runners now. It's not like they all just suddenly become running infected. I apologize for using the term zombie. I know that might be offensive to some people, as this is by definition not a zombie film, but please forgive me if the word slips out. Just like last week with Virus 32, it may slip out, but you know what I'm talking about when I say it. So at this point, Jim gets out of the restaurant and he runs into a group of the infected who are kind of standing over a dead body. Do you guys remember last week when I said I think Virus 32, that I literally think someone in Argentina watched The Sadness last year and kind of made a quick ripoff? After watching The Sadness this week, I'm more convinced of that than ever, because there are so many similarities. Like this movie even has the infected kind of admiring their kill. Like, they'll kill someone and then literally they'll take like 30 seconds and just kind of sit there admiring their kill until they're distracted by someone else, by another uninfected person, and then they go and attack that person. So and there's other similarities too that I didn't mention last week. So yeah, but thankfully Virus 32 is not kind of on our minds anymore, except for me bringing it up that I'm convinced it's a fucking ripoff now. But
yeah, no, I kind of got a lot of that hint during the rewatch. I kind of spotted a lot of it.
Yeah. Exactly.
I mean, yeah, the behavior of the infected is unbelievably eerie. I don't know if that's just the idea of utilizing something like a virus instead of, like, a zombie plague or something, but yeah, it comes off incredibly similar. Now that having watched them pretty close to each other, it kind of stood out pretty easily.
Exactly, yeah. All right, so at this point, like I said, Jim runs into a group of infected. They notice, because he's trying to start his bike, his moped, as quietly as possible. But unfortunately, the group of infected does hear him start up his bike. He races off while they're chasing him, literally giggling. And it seems like every time they end a scene in this movie, it ends with a close-up of one of the infected just looking and smiling. Which, like I said, it just creeps me right the fuck out every time I see it. Jim ends up getting away, and he ends up getting home where he tries to reach his girl. Unfortunately, she either doesn't hear her phone or doesn't have her with her. We'll get back to that in a second. And he turns on the TV, and this is where we start to get all the COVID similarities, because on the TV there's a newscast where the newscaster is interviewing a doctor. And he basically says, "Doctor, why should we believe you that, this virus is a problem? I mean, we have 0 deaths. As of that morning, there were 0 deaths of what was called the Alvin virus. I believe they called it the Alvin virus in the movie." And the doctor is basically like, well, it's not that anything has already happened. It's just that this virus has the potential to mutate based on the protein strains in the virus. I've never seen the potential to mutate like this before. And he literally is, telling them, yes, nothing has happened yet, but literally at the snap of a finger, this entire city could be aflame. And guess he was right. So, and then the newscast ends, and just as Jim turns off his TV, he realizes there's someone standing behind him. He turns around, and it's Mr. Lin, his neighbor from next door. But of course, at this point, Mr. Lin's eyes are now completely black and red, and he's got that grin on his face, and he instantly just starts talking about all the vile sexual shit that he's going to do to Jim's girlfriend or fiance, whatever she is. But yeah, just unapologetically just starts talking about how he's going to finger her for Jim. Like, oh, Jim, don't worry. You won't have to do it anymore. I'll finger her for you. It's like literally they're just having a normal conversation, but they're saying the most vile things. God damn it, this movie. Okay. They end up getting into a fight. Mr. Lin ends up attacking Jim with a garden shears, like a pair of garden shears, those big ones. Think of The Burning. Think of the famous scene from The Burning, and you know what I'm talking about. They get into a struggle. Jim is able to stop Mr. Lin from cutting off his head with those garden shears. But what ends up happening is Jim accidentally gets 2 of his fingers in between the blades. And you kind of see Mr. Lin notice that. Like, he looks down and he's like, oh, look at where your fingers are. And then snap, just closes the garden shears, and 2 of Jim's fingers just go flying up in the air. They land on the ground. Mr. Lin grabs one of them and just puts it in his mouth and starts chewing it. Mind you, these infected are not flesh eaters. I'm pretty sure that he was doing this more for effect, because he put it in his mouth, he chewed it for a couple of chews, and then he spits it into the fish tank, where then the fish starts eating part of Jim's finger. I'm sorry. I know it's unintentional comedy, but I still found it fucking funny. And he's able to subdue Mr. Lin by smashing him in the head with a toaster. He does not kill Mr. Lin, because as soon as he notices him start to get up, he then runs out of his apartment. And basically at that point, we're done spending time with Jim. Maybe not done, but done for at least the first couple of acts. And now we are reunited with Kat. And what we see is Kat getting on the subway. Jumping and actually, before the subway scene, I still have to point out, this movie has one of the coolest suicides I've ever seen. Now, I don't know if it was a suicide or if maybe one of the infected threw somebody off a building, but it was one of the coolest fucking bodies. It was not a Universal Studios dummy death by any stretch. This was fucking awesome. No cut either. Literally, we see someone jump or get thrown off a building. The camera follows them all the way down to splat until they hit the ground. So again, kudos for that. Practically a throwaway scene in this movie, but in any other movie, it's just something that we would be talking about a lot. But yeah, it's just another scene for the sadness, which just makes this movie fucking amazing. Okay. I forgot to mention, while Jim is in his apartment, he's flipping through the channels on his TV before he gets to the newscast. And everything is on the emergency broadcast system, the red screen telling you to wait for instructions. Finally, he finds a channel that's actually playing a cartoon. Did you guys notice that cartoon? It's basically just a wolf chasing 3 girls dressed as lambs. It seems harmless at first, but then when Jim gets up off the couch and walks away, did you keep watching the cartoon? It's a fucking porn.
Really?
Yeah, the wolf is fucking those 3 girls. Not in the scene, in the shot when it's close up on the television, but next time you watch it, when Jim gets up off the couch and walks towards his kitchen, keep watching the television. It's straight up an unedited porn. Like, we see the wolf's dick going in and out of the girls and everything.
Holy
Dude, I'm dead serious. You gotta watch it. It is amazing. I'm like, and then I'm thinking, is this actually airing in Taiwan, or is this like Jim maybe starting to succumb to the virus? We'll see. Okay, so yeah, that cartoon was fucking awesome. At this point, actually, this happens right before Mr. Lin attacks Jim. We hear one of those public service announcements, but not like on TV, but like, you know how you get the air raid siren sometimes? Obviously not in America, but you know, when a country's being attacked by another, you know, country, they'll have the air raid sirens telling their citizens to get inside. Basically, a city official of some kind, gets on the intercom, that covers the whole city. And he just starts talking the most vile shit, talking about how I'm going to kill every man that I run into. I'm going to break every fucking bone in your body. And if I run into any women, I'm going to rape you to death. Just the shit that he's saying. And this is over a loudspeaker, like out in public. And so everyone in the city is hearing this. And I'm just like, what a fucking beautiful touch, you know, something that you wouldn't expect. But there it is, a public service announcement telling you that he's going to kill you as soon as he gets a hold of you. Yeah, pretty fucking awesome. Okay. Then we get to Kat. And as we see Kat enter a subway train, we see her sit next to an older businessman, what looks like a prim, proper gentleman. But then as the train ride goes along, he kind of starts almost hitting on Kat, basically says, you know, how beautiful you are. First he brings up the fact that she's reading a book and talks about how no one reads books on the train anymore. Everybody's connected to their phones, blah, blah, blah. And then he starts trying to have a conversation with her. Like, what are you reading? What's it about? And she politely looks at him and says, sir, you know, I appreciate you being friendly, but I'd really like to concentrate on my book right now. You know, about as polite as someone can be. And then you start to see his mood change. You start to see him talk about how, young people these days, they have no appreciation for compliments, blah, blah, blah. You know, stupid women, you know, who the fuck do you think she is? And, you know, literally murmuring to himself. At this point, an overweight girl kind of gets on the train. Kat gives the overweight girl her seat. Obviously, she doesn't want to sit next to this creeper anymore. But as soon as Kat stands up and the fat girl is now sitting next to the businessman, we see another guy enter the train with sunglasses on. He's got sunglasses on. He's not with anybody. He's not speaking. Then the camera zooms in on his face, and what we see is a single tear fall from one of his eyes. And what we come to find out is that tear is the first sign that these people are about to fucking go crazy. After that one tear falls, he literally out of nowhere just pulls out like a hunting knife and just starts stabbing everyone on the train. I mean, Don and I can't control our laughter. I'm sorry, but this scene is fucking masterful. He's just stabbing people left and right. Men, women, children, doesn't fucking matter. He's just stab, 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 stab. Finally, they subdue him. And what's the first thing he says? Did I break the world record? Does anyone know if I broke the world record? This guy is fucking concerned with the fucking world record of killing people. I love this goddamn movie.
I'm saying this guy's my second favorite. Just after the businessman. The glee that he has when he shouts that line. Did I break the record? Did I break the record? Did I break the record? It's like, God.
Oh God! And his sunglasses never fall off either. He's got the sunglasses. I don't know what it is, but something about him covered in blood with the sunglasses on made me think of Bill Paxton in Near Dark. For those who have seen Near Dark, you remember the scene where Bill Paxton kind of is set on fire, and then for the rest of the movie, he's just kind of a charred mess, but he's still wearing sunglasses. That's what this guy reminded me of, Bill Paxton in Near Dark. So yeah, and if you haven't seen Near Dark and you like vampire movies, what the fuck is wrong with you? Go see that movie. It's awesome. Anyway, and then after they finally are able to subdue the original attacker, someone else on the train just starts stabbing people for no reason. And a couple more people on the train are able to subdue him. So that now there's 2 people being subdued. And then our businessman comes back. And what he does is he stands right in front of the fat girl. And literally the camera slowly zooms up to show his gigantic shit-eating grin and his black fucking eyes, which just, holy shit. I mean, if you see the cover image of this movie, you know how fucking terrifying this businessman is. I mean, when he's alive, he looks like this meek, just kind of older, thin gentleman that doesn't look like he would be a threat to anybody. But then as soon as he is infected, he turns into fucking super zombie. Just ridiculous strength, ridiculous. And like I said, again, I'm going to be saying it a lot throughout the movie. The shit that comes out of his mouth. Holy goddamn. Like, good Christian people should never, ever watch this movie. Just avoid it at all costs, my friends, because you're going to go to hell. I assure you, me and Don are going straight to hell for enjoying this movie so much, and I don't care. I will do it with a smile on my face, much like our antagonists here. So,
and I'll be right behind you, passing out pamphlets.
There you go. Okay. Oh my God. So our infected businessman, I forget his exact line, but he says something to the girl. I think he calls her, excuse my French, a fat cunt. He says, "You fucking fat cunt." And then he stabs her in the eye with his umbrella. Once again, no cut, one shot, boom, right in. The shot holds on the umbrella in her eye, and then he pulls it out. This is all one shot, my friends. No cuts. Nah, this movie is unflinching. They don't give a shit about your sensibilities. They're trying to make you as uncomfortable as possible, and I love it for that. So now our fat girl, I don't know if we even get her name at any point in the movie.
She says it once when they arrive at the hospital, I think.
Yeah, I don't remember. But yeah, I mean, she ends up being a really cool character too, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So at this point, her eye has been stabbed, or basically poked out with the umbrella. And Kat, sees this, and she helps the fat girl basically get off the train. At this point, more people are becoming infected. More people are attacking the uninfected. Finally, the train arrives at a station and the doors open, and we see all the uninfected people come rushing out of the train, just, terrified and screaming. We see everybody run in one direction, but Kat and the fat girl end up going in a different direction. I guess they just don't want to go with the masses, or maybe she thinks she knows another way out of the station. They're walking around the station. Kat is helping the fat girl walk to, make sure that she gets out. And of course, our businessman catches up. And when our businessman catches up, the 2 girls, Kat and the fat girl, have met this well-built young guy. I mean, he could be like a young bodybuilder. He's in really good shape. They scream to him that, they're being chased. He's trying to kill them, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, this guy doesn't seem to know what's going on outside yet because he's completely clueless to, what the girls are saying. But then suddenly our businessman turns the corner, and we see, our young, tough guy, of course, do his thing, act tough, try to, get the upper hand on the old man. But then I wish I would have wrote down more of these lines, because he says something to the young guy that, again, made me jump off the couch. It was so fucking gross. And then, of course, he ends up seeing an axe, like a fire axe, in like one of those emergency panels. And he grabs that axe, and that becomes his weapon for the rest of the movie. And thank God it is, because he uses that thing with absolute perfection, but we'll get to that. And so our young bodybuilder type is, of course, dispatched, and our girls continue trying to run away from the businessman. Now, the businessman isn't running. He's got this Jason Voorhees attitude where he's like, I'll catch up to you when I catch up to you. You know, he's not concerned with chasing you necessarily. Finally, the girls are able to find an exit. They get to a tunnel that looks like it leads outside of the train station, but and it's pretty long. It's probably, I don't know, maybe an eighth of a mile long. It's a few hundred yards. And at the end of the tunnel, they see a security guard, and they start screaming to the security guard for help. Please help us. Please help us. Instead of helping, the guard goes and starts to close the gate. And then we get our Indiana Jones scene, of course, where the girls are running or trying to run, because don't forget, you know, the fat girl had her eye poked out, so she's not exactly running so much as Kat is kind of helping her walk. They get that scene where, you know, the Indiana Jones scene where they get to it, they make it underneath the doors just in the nick of time, just before the businessman catches up to him. And in one of my favorite moments in the movie that doesn't even have to do with horror, the fat girl literally punches the security guard in the fucking mouth and breaks his nose. I thought it was spectacular. It's just one of those things I didn't expect. Like, I expected Kat to be mad enough to punch him, but this quiet little demure, fat girl that's been quiet and, basically not trying to bother anybody, literally just rears back and punches the shit out of the security guard. So yeah, that was pretty awesome. They ask where the hospital is. The security guard lets them know where the hospital is, kind of points the direction. They then go to the hospital. Unfortunately, the emergency room of the hospital has been overrun. So there's people in the waiting room waiting to get in, but they're basically being quarantined in there since none of them are infected, and infected have actually gotten into the emergency room proper. They're kind of keeping everyone in there. They're bringing doctors into that room to look at people as they come in with injuries. Obviously, the doctor looks at the fat girl, sees that her eye is fucking missing, and rushes her into a room to get her prepped and everything. And as they pull her away, Kat and the girl have a nice little emotional moment where she kind of says, "Thank you so much. Thank you for saving my life. No one else would have ever done that for me. I'm just a quiet fat girl that nobody acknowledges, but you took it upon yourself to help me. I'll never forget you." It's actually a pretty good moment considering the amount of time that we've spent with these two characters. And then at that point, they go their separate ways. The fat girl is brought into the hospital proper to have her wounds tended to, and Kat goes back to the waiting room because they're not being allowed to leave. While they're in the waiting room, they get a presidential announcement. Basically, the president of China comes on the television having a press conference. And the press conference starts with like a general. I'm not sure what the exact title of the person is, but he's like a high-ranking official. And he's the one who introduces the president, and the president comes on, lets them know, we're not 100% sure if this is the Alvin virus, but it's not completely out of the realm of possibility. It seemed like he was being somewhat honest, letting people know that we don't know what's happening, but there's obviously something happening. Normal people are turning into homicidal maniacs. And it's not just strangers. It potentially could be your own family members. So just be wary, be aware of your surroundings, and blah, blah, blah. The kind of basic, we're in this together type speech that, any official might give in this situation. Then the president steps away from the mic, and the commander or general, whatever you want to call this guy, he doesn't have a military outfit on, so I'm assuming he's some kind of general, basically starts reiterating what the president said, saying, we have to make sure, excuse me, we have to make sure that we're vigilant, that we protect ourselves, that we protect our family members, wear masks, blah, 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 try to prevent the virus. But then you start to see his mood kind of start to change. Maybe not his mood, but just how he's speaking. It starts to slow down a little bit. Then the camera pans back to the hospital where everybody's kind of staring at the television. We see a couple of guys say, what the fuck? The government's no help to us, just like usual, blah, blah, blah. Then the camera goes back to the press conference, and we see the camera pan up on the general or commander, whoever he is. And then we see the single tear drop that lets you know shit's about to go down. And what happens? As soon as that single tear falls on his face, his eyes turn black. He suddenly has a shit-eating grin on his face, and he literally attacks the president of China on live television. He grabs the president, doesn't like try to rip any flesh off or anything. He literally grabs the president in like a chokehold. He pulls out one of his own grenades. The general pulls out a grenade, pulls the pin, shoves it inside the president's mouth, and then holds the president up so that he's literally facing the camera. And we get, my friends, if you thought the exploding head in Scanners was something, holy shit, you need to see this one. This was fucking awesome. Just a grenade in the mouth head explosion. Nothing that we haven't seen before, but just the fact that this is the Chinese president on live television and this is happening to him, yeah, the stakes have suddenly been raised. And I can't say enough good things about this. As soon as the press conference is over, like as soon as the president's head explodes, obviously they cut off the press conference. It's back to the emergency broadcast system. And then everybody in the waiting room starts getting kind of restless and violent even. Like two of the guys in the room actually start fighting each other. Obviously, as the movie viewer, we think that one of them must be infected, but no, it's just frustration. These two guys start just punching each other. The one security guard that's there who actually has a gun pulls his weapon out and tells everyone, back up, just everyone calm down, no one is leaving, we need to remain calm and see what's going to happen, blah blah blah. At this point we see Kat kind of look towards the door behind the security guard. Then we see the security guard slowly move off to his right, and standing right behind him outside the door is our businessman with his goddamn evil grin on his face, just staring inside. I will say that the businessman actually smiles the least in this movie. Like there's multiple scenes where the businessman isn't smiling, and I'm not sure if that's even creepier or not, but it's pretty heavy. Okay, so hospital scene. The businessman uses his axe, which of course he still has. He breaks through the door, the glass door, and in the same motion of breaking the glass door, he plants the axe into the security guard's back. Of course, he's the only one who has a weapon in that room. So he basically, as soon as he smashes the door, about a half dozen to a dozen infected just come running in behind the businessman and just start taking everybody out. Once everybody in the waiting room is kind of dead, the businessman, or infected, the businessman gets up and starts walking around the hospital. And yeah, I can already see Don's smile forming on his face. He ends up, the businessman ends up finding our fat girl, the girl who had her eye poked out earlier in the film by the same character. And this time, she's wearing a neck brace. The eye has been dressed, so she's got a fresh bandage on it. But then he comes over. She's in a wheelchair, obviously, not able to move, or at least not willing to. And the businessman just kind of looks at her and goes, "Oh, look at you. How lucky that I ran into you." And then he starts kind of looking at her eye, and he's like, well, I want the other girl more, but I think you'll do for now. And this is it, my friends. He pulls the eye bandage off the girl's head. He takes his pants off and insert dick into eye socket. My friends, an actual skull fucking in this movie. Oh my God. I mean, let me tell you, if you haven't turned off this podcast by now, then you are one of my people. I'm pretty sure just the things that we've described in this movie would be enough to turn off most genre fans. But yeah, holy shit. skull fuck. And unfortunately, it's not like we actually see the insertion, but we get the sound effects. And I think the sound effects might be fucking worse to hear.
Oh God,
squishing.
that moistness, that squishing sounds.
God damn it. The whole time the fat girl's screaming. She's just screaming at the top of her lungs. Obviously, the shot that we see is from the businessman's waist up. And you just see the look of ecstasy on his face as he's pumping in and out. And the girl.
I gotta say, I almost had a Mandela effect about this, because I, for a long time, thought at that point, he said, finally, one of your holes is going to be useful for something.
Yes, that's right. Oh, God damn this guy. So after that spectacular scene of just absolute debauchery, we actually get a little bit of a respite in this movie. And that's one of the things I kind of like about this movie, is where they kind of put their slower scenes. Because a lot of times it feels like, especially in the second half of the film, when there's a major scene of gore or violence or something, we get a little bit of a quiet scene, almost like a chance to catch your breath, which I actually appreciate that, because an hour and 40 minutes of just nonstop, ridiculous zombie action is going to get exhausting. So after our little skull love scene, we move on to a scene where Kat and Jim are finally able to connect with each other on cell phones. Kat is able to get a hold of Jim. She's using the security guard's phone that she took earlier in the hospital scene, and she finally gets a hold of Jim, lets Jim know where she is, and that she's not hurt, she's not injured, that she's not feeling poorly or anything, so everything is good with her. And Jim does something that I absolutely fucking love. It's a simple little thing that most people probably won't even notice, but I just absolutely love this, because, again, it kind of points to being grounded in reality and a little bit of realism. Right at the end of the conversation, Jim actually tells Kat, put the phone on silent and I'll be there as soon as I can. How many other guys in that situation are going to think about that she's carrying a phone that she doesn't own, and that potentially the ringing of that phone could give away her position, or, get her killed or whatever. I know it's just a silly throwaway line, but exactly, it's fucking smart. And I'm giving this movie its credit, because most people aren't going to think of that. And that little throwaway line just makes me love this movie even more. I know it's a silly thing to point out, but I don't care.
Because 9 times out of 10, that's going to come into play later on, because dumbass never turned the phone off, and exactly, bam, there's that's going to put her in danger later on. So yeah, that's that it plays into that kind of stereotype where the ringing phone 5 minutes for the conversation puts her in danger, and how easy was it to bypass that by doing what he did and just saying put it on mute or silent or whatever.
Exactly. With one line, they're able to avoid one of the one of the many tropes that I can't stand. We all know how much I love horror tropes, so yeah, just that tiny little 2-second line just made me smile ear to ear, among the millions of things in this movie that are making me smile. So anyway, after Jim and Kat hang up the phone, Jim starts to have these weird hallucinations. There's a scene where he sees a mannequin head kind of floating in a reflecting pool near the hospital, or not near the hospital, but near where he is. And literally the mannequin head comes to life in his perception, obviously. And it looks exactly like, our infected folks here, with the crazy grin, the black tongue, the black eyes, and then he just kind of snaps out of it. And when he snaps out of it, what do we see? A single tear fall down his face. Now, obviously, we're going to make the assumption that the virus potentially has infected him. But it could also just be that he's, seeing things and he's kind of freaked out about it. So it could legitimately an actual tear. So who knows? But that is what we see. Okay. After this, My God, folks, it just seems like every time there's a crazy scene, it just gets the very next scene gets even crazier. And how are we gonna top a skull fucking? How about an infected orgy? Yes, at one point in the film, our little security guard, douchebag who closed the gate on our two heroines, runs into an orgy of just blood and flesh, and it's literally, it's almost Lovecraftian. It's almost something that you would see in The Thing, because it's literally there. It's like 5 or 6 people all in a pile covered in blood, just gleefully just fucking the hell out of each other. And it just adds to the craziness of this film. As soon as
Yeah, I, I
go
was gonna
ahead.
say I think that's what kind of sets this apart from similar movies is kind of like the yes, they've gone crazy, but they're still cognitive function, and it's like the gleeful nature of what they're doing. Like it's not like a 28 days later rage virus where it's just taken them over so much that they're just simply in a state of madness and rage the whole time. Like these guys, yes, they're crazy with what they're doing, but it's like they're glad to be doing it, and they get glee out of the sadisticness and the overt sexualization, which makes me wonder if there's some type of like social commentary going on there. Um, I don't know if they're trying to say toxic masculinity. I don't know if it's like a pushback, supposed to be like, some commentary on pushback from like pandemic measures,
Mhm.
or in this one's more like a plague more than a pandemic as far as how severe it is. But it seems like there could be something going on there, because it seems like a purposeful thing to put that kind of stuff in there, as rather than just make them like dumb, mindless, like rage monsters, right?
Exactly. That's one of the biggest reasons why I have a problem calling this a zombie movie. Just like, I've already discussed about, what I consider a zombie, but in this movie, even more so than like a 28 Days Later, besides the fact that these zombies actually speak, they retain their memories. They know who they are. They know who other people are. I mean, they actually, our businessman remembers the fat girl and says, "Oh, where's your pretty little friend?" I mean, this is why I have a major problem calling this a zombie movie. I'm not, like I said, I'm never going to argue with anyone who calls it that. I mean, the trailer calls it that, so that's fine. But this is just so much beyond a zombie or infected film that I really hope that people don't pigeonhole this film. This film has a lot more to say than some people want to give it credit for. Let's just say that. So yeah, I'm with Mike. There is probably a lot more subtext in this than we're even recognizing. Part of it is probably just because of how happy I am watching the film. I'm just not looking for subtext. I'm enjoying what's on the screen so heavily that, yeah, I'm just not thinking about commentary. But yeah, I guarantee if
Yeah.
we really,
Plus, sometimes when it comes to like foreign movies, there's also cultural stuff that's hard to pinpoint from like the
Yeah,
American POV. So that's why I more speculate than I'm not making absolute statements. Because I'm viewing it through an American POV of like, if this was happening here, what could the commentary be? But
sure.
as far as like the culture of a different country, they could be touching on that or relating to it, but also taking on a completely different thing or
Mhm.
commentary behind what we're seeing on the screen.
Exactly. Yeah. All right, so after our little wormy security guard sees his little infected orgy, he runs away, or he tries to run away in the hopes of not getting their attention. Unfortunately, when he turns the corner, he guess who he runs into? He runs into our fat girl. Yes, fresh from her skull fucking, and she is now very obviously infected. She's got the smile, the black eyes. In fact, she's decimating someone's head when he actually runs into her, to the point where it actually looks like she might be eating part of the head, because she actually spits something out of her mouth. She instantly recognizes the guard. And this is what I mean about calling these things zombies. I mean, she instantly recognizes them. She calls them a little worm. She looks at him and says, "Oh, it's my little worm. Hello, how are you?" And she starts talking about how in life she had a lot of problems making friends because, she's a big girl. She's not very pretty. She's not very confident. And, she just doesn't make friends. And then she's like, "But I just now realized that you just have to pick the right friends and then everything will be fine." And as soon as she says that, like a fucking horde, at least a half dozen infected just come out of the woodwork and just surround Little Worm. I'm just going to call him Little Worm for the rest of the night because I like that description. And they're basically holding down Little Worm. See, again, they're showing intelligence. They know that this girl wants revenge against Little Worm, so not a one of them is actively attacking him yet. And what she does is she picks up a bone saw, which of course they're in a hospital, so it makes sense that there's a bone saw there. And unfortunately, we don't really get to see what she actually does with the bone saw. It looks like she, attacks his midsection while he's being held down by the other infected. Blood and flesh and guts are being sprayed all over the place. And then basically, as soon as, our fat girl starts cutting Little Worm up, the rest of the zombies start just decimating his body, pulling his eyeballs out, tearing at his neck. Just, one of those great, like Dawn of the Dead or Day of the Dead, rip aparts that we love, no one loves so much. So another incredibly satisfying kill. Plus for the character that it's occurring to as well. It's just kind of a guilty pleasure. So there you go. After this, we are back to Kat. Kat is running around the hospital. Unfortunately, the horde has kind of found her location. She's running around trying to get away from them. And she ends up getting into a hallway where she's able to barricade the doors on either end of the hallway. Unfortunately, the horde starts banging down one of the doors, and right at the front of the door as it's opening is our businessman. And he's literally, and of course, he's spitting out his piss and vinegar, talking about, "Oh, no, I haven't forgotten about you. I'm still going to fuck you to death, my dear." It just, again, just gleefully cringeworthy. And they end up having an altercation. He's chasing her down a hallway. At one point, she's able to hide and grab a fire extinguisher. And then with said fire extinguisher, she sprays it in the businessman's face, so he kind of loses sight of her. And before he's able to catch sight of her again, she absolutely smashes the shit out of him on the side of the head with the fire extinguisher. Then she straddles him, and she hits him with the fire extinguisher at full force only twice. Now, folks, you know me, you know the way I am. I fucking hate when people are allowed to monologue or, weapon droppers. And she stops hitting him after like 2 smashes with the fire extinguisher. And then he has his departing line, I guess you could call it, where he says, "Oh, I know you. You're just like me. You're sick and twisted just like me. You just won't admit it." And then I forget like specifically what his actual last words are. And then at that point, she just starts smashing the shit out of his head with the fire extinguisher. My friends, she has to hit him close to 24 fucking times. And every time she lifts up that fire extinguisher and brings it back down, I love her even more. I am just so happy to finally see a horror heroine just not even give a shit about how society might look at her or, her perception of death and murder. No, she knows that this piece of shit has been stalking her for most of this day. She finally gets the upper hand on him, and she leaves his head a fucking mound of flesh. Just another great kill. And yes, we do get to see it, my friends, in all its glory.
Yeah, if you're going to take out like your kind of main baddie there, that's the way you want them to go out. Nothing cheap, nothing easy, definitely not off screen, and it was vicious.
It was vicious, satisfying, glorious. I mean, there are so many adjectives we can put on this scene, but yeah.
Yeah, and to me, this is the type of thing where, like, because I did hear some criticism of Ty West X, that like some of the kills were a little tame or soft or not that great, and then maybe half off screen or whatever. So I'm like, okay, well, throw this one on then, because
exactly.
they don't pull any punches with this one.
What's funny is that those same people that are complaining about X having a lack of gore are probably going to watch this movie and say, "Oh, it's too over the top. It's too much." You know, it's like, well, you can't satisfy some people. And I'm only saying that because over the last couple of days, I have gone online and listened to podcasts and watched some YouTube horror movie reviewers talk about this movie. And my friends, most of the American sites that I'm running into are not liking the sadness. They're actually putting this movie down. They're condemning it for its level of depravity, for some of the obvious, just awful shit that we've already talked about, and then some of the awful shit that we have yet to talk about. And that's so sad to me. No pun intended, since we are reviewing the sadness. But really, to see a horror fan, someone who considers themselves a horror fan, review this movie and then just condemn it because they couldn't handle the level of violence in it, that's really frustrating to me. Be objective, give your opinion. Yes, say things like, it didn't work for me, I couldn't handle it. Hell, if a reviewer were to come out and say they couldn't even finish the movie but still did a review for it, I would still have 100% respect for that podcaster because they were true to themselves. But then come out and give an honest and somewhat objective review of it. Don't just condemn it. One YouTuber in general, who I will never watch one of her fucking videos again. I'm not going to bring her up here because I don't want to get accused of flaming anybody. But she literally went so far as to say anybody who likes the sadness just is a sick and twisted person who I don't want to associate with. Those were almost her exact fucking words. That is frustrating, my friends. This woman calls herself a horror fan, a horror aficionado, a horror reviewer. And then just because there's a level of violence and depravity in a movie that she can't handle, those of us who enjoyed it, we're the ones who have the problem. Yeah, that sounds quite accurate to me. And like I said, I'm not going to sit here and talk about, oh, she loses horror cred, in my opinion, or anything like that. Everyone is entitled to their opinion, and that's fine. But when you're going to condemn a piece of art just because you personally couldn't handle it, and then actively tell your listeners, oh, don't watch this movie offers no value whatsoever, nah, fuck you. Just absolutely fuck you straight in the face. I don't like that. Like I said, be honest. Give your own opinion. Like if Mike would have came here and said he hated this movie, at least I know Mike's not going to sit here and try to tell people not to watch it or to condemn the movie as a piece of trash. This is why I work with the podcasters I work with. None of us are 100% objective. It's incredibly hard to be, but at least we try to be. And as much as I've talked about some of the movies that I've hated over the years, and longtime listeners know, episodes like Greta, Black Christmas 2019, where I've just gone completely crazy, I still would never say, don't watch this movie. This movie has no value. Or if you like this movie, you're an idiot. Statements like that will never leave my lips. And, fans, listeners hold me to that because, it's something I take a little bit of pride in. And I just can't believe.
There's a difference when something's not someone's personal cup of tea and saying anyone who likes it, there's something wrong with them.
Yeah, I mean, we had this all about 10 years ago with the Serbian film, a Serbian film. It's the exact same thing. People can't get past the debauchery of the film, so they just condemn it, but then don't recognize the masterful filmmaking, because it's the same. I have the same opinion of a Serbian film. A Serbian film, if you can get past the awful, awful shit that happens in that movie, it's a beautiful film. It actually makes Serbia look somewhat nice. Beautiful filmmaking, nice cinematography, a great score, pretty much the same things I've said about this movie. But again, I've had people literally tell me I'm sick for enjoying that movie, and it's like I don't see, it's entertainment, it's art, it's fiction. I don't understand why that makes me sick. or why someone doesn't want to associate with me anymore because of it. It just that really bothers me. That kind of hypocrisy just bugs me, because I mean, these horror fans, these horror reviewers, they're saying this without even the slightest bit of irony that our genre has been treated like this since its inception. I mean, think about the 20s and 30s, Hollywood, they looked down at horror films. It was always the B movie, the silly thing that an actor did if they had the time or needed money. It wasn't until maybe the 60s or the 70s where horror was really being recognized as a legitimate filmmaking technique. And I am incredibly sorry I've gone off on this tangent, folks. I just realized that I haven't spoken anything about The Sadness in like 10 minutes. I genuinely apologize. But like I said, some of the reviews that I've watched for this are just disheartening. They're disappointing. That they're sad. It just makes me really sad to think that there's people like this out there, but whatever. So okay, back to our glorious movie. After Kat finally dispatches the businessman and literally just leaves him a mound of flesh on the floor, a door suddenly opens right next to her, right next to the businessman's body. And what we see is a man in a full hazard suit, like a hazmat suit, completely covered up. And he basically pulls a gun on Kat and forces her to come into the room. He chains her up to a shower and then like kind of forces her to wash all the blood and tissue off of her that she has on her. Then, once she's chained up and under the water, then in his infinite wisdom, he decides to tell her, oh, by the way, I'm a virologist. I'm studying the virus. I'm trying to find people that are immune so that, potentially we could use their blood to create a serum or a vaccine or whatever the case may be. I've heard a lot of people talk about this scene kind of bringing the movie down or kind of halting the action to a complete stop. And I can see that point. If you feel that way, fine. I'm not going to argue with you. But don't forget, we just had our big bad killed. Our big bad was just smashed in epically glorious fashion. I need a breath. I was laughing and cheering so goddamn hard during that scene. I need a break. So the filmmaker gives us this little scene where a virologist basically lets Kat know, that he's been looking at the virus, that he knew something was going to happen. Oh, and then when the virologist takes his mask off, guess who it is? It's the guy from the newscast earlier, or the internet cast that Jim was watching on his phone, that where he was talking about, oh, I think this virus is going to mutate. It has the most similarities to rabies, and we need to take this seriously. And of course, the host of the show is kind of making fun of him. Why should we believe you? No, there've been no deaths, there've been no reported cases, blah blah blah. Anyway, so our virologist basically forces Kat to take an injection against her will. He injects her with the Alvin virus, with the strain of the virus that's turning people into the infected monsters that they are now. He decides to do this because when she walks into the room, she's completely covered in blood. The businessman's blood and guts and hair and everything else, and she's just covered in it. And he has the idea that, oh, well, she hasn't turned yet, so maybe she's immune. So he decides to give her a shot of the virus directly into her neck, and then basically says, well, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes. If you haven't turned, then you and I are going to take a helicopter and get out of here and get to a medical facility so that they can synthesize some kind of vaccine from your blood. Or if you do turn, then I'm very sorry, but I'll have to kill you. And we wait the couple of minutes, and he's talking, kind of back and forth, talking about what his plan is and blah, blah, blah. And while he's doing this, Kat still has her phone with her. Even though he stripped her of her clothes, she somehow cleverly was able to hold on to the phone that she stole from Little Worm. And she's able to send a text to Jim, basically letting him know, I'm in the hospital. I'm in the maternity ward. There is a virologist here holding me hostage. Be careful. He has a gun. And then what we see, we don't actually see Jim's upper body. All we see is his lower body. And what we see is he drops the phone. He just drops it on the ground into a puddle and starts walking towards the hospital. We see the hospital in the foreground of the shot, which seems odd that he would just drop his phone and go into the hospital. But, we can assume that he's concerned for his girl and wants to get in there as quickly as possible, whatever the case may be. So basically, after the virologist realizes that she's not going to turn and that she is immune to the virus, that's when he makes the decision, okay, we're gonna have to get out of here and synthesize a vaccine from your blood, blah blah blah. And he ends up letting her go and basically leading her, still at gunpoint, by the way. Oh, and I forgot to mention, he does mention that the gun, it's a 3D printed gun. So it's not like an actual all metal, handgun. It's 3D printed. It still works, mind you. He does use it a couple of times. But I did want to put that point out there for the next scene. So like I said, he is leading Kat out of the maternity ward. Oh God, I skipped the fucking infected baby, which was goddamn nightmare fuel. During this scene with the virologist, they actually find out that he killed all the babies in the maternity ward because the infected were trying to break into the maternity ward to basically kill and do whatever awful thing their minds thought of to these babies. He claims that he killed them all to put them out of their misery because the infected would have done much, much worse things to them. But at one point when Kat takes her clothes off and puts them in one of those contamination bags,
Biohazard
biohazard
bags,
exactly. Human waste, human tissue, blah blah blah. She opens it, to put her clothes in there, and there's something moving in there, and she starts to realize, oh shit, I'm in the maternity ward. She goes into the basket, moves the clothes, and we see an infected baby. And I don't know about you guys, but that image of that baby fucking affected me. You guys remember earlier in the episode I talked about happy puppet syndrome? Please do not look it up. That baby was a perfect example of what real life happy puppet syndrome looks like. And my friends, it affected me. I actually paused the movie this last time I watched it when that image came by, because it's not the most, it's not going to work for everybody. I understand that, but it affected me greatly. What were you going to say, Mike?
No, just like, it definitely affected me seeing that baby.
I mean, compare the baby last week in Virus 32, that CG monstrosity, to this baby, and there's just no comparison. This baby is so much more nightmare fuel than what we got last week. Oh, and then I did forget to mention, by the way, you guys remember, for those of you who were with us last week, you remember that I had a major problem with the ending of Virus 32, because as soon as they kill their big bad, the movie's over. The movie literally ends. The sadness does it right. They kill the big bad, yes, but they understand that there's more story to tell, because there's still the story of Jim and Kat. We still want to see them get together. We still want to see what happens when they get together. So kudos again to the sadness for not making the mistake Virus 32 ended up making. Anyway, back to the movie. Our virologist is leading Kat through the hallway. Kat looks down at the body of the businessman that she freshly demolished just a few minutes earlier, and she sees a blood imprint on the ground of the axe that he was carrying, the axe that he's been carrying since he got it in the subway station. And she basically out loud says, "Where's the axe?" Now, obviously, the virologist has no idea what she's talking about. And as soon as he turns around, an infected brings the axe down and literally cuts his foot in half. Literally cuts the front, not just a few toes, my friend. No, cut the front half of his foot off. Glorious axe shot. He ends up going down on the ground. He is able to get a couple of shots off with his 3D printed gun. He's able to dispatch the two infected that are there that attacked him with the axe. Kat's now kind of helping him through the hall, so roles are kind of reversed now, because he's walking around on half a foot, bleeding profusely. I can't believe this guy lived as long as he did. And basically, they end up getting down to the end of the hall to a set of double doors, and the double doors violently swing open, and there's Jim, my friends. Yes, the reunion of Jim and Kat. Unfortunately, when the camera pans up, I'm sure you guessed it, Jim has that shit-eating grin on his face, and his eyes are completely black. And the first thing he says is, "Hey, Doc, thanks for watching my girl. I get to fuck her now, and I'm going to chop your dick off." I mean, like I said, the shit that these infected say, it's just so off the cuff, just, unfiltered, beyond unfiltered. So after Jim makes his infected introduction, he starts to advance on Cat and the doctor. The doctor is able to get a shot off with his 3D printed gun, but Jim is able to kind of dodge the bullet partially, but it does get him in the neck a little bit. Not straight through the middle, but kind of off to the side. But he's infected, so it doesn't really affect him all that much. And then the doc goes and takes another shot with his gun, and this time the gun fucking blows up in his hand. Yes, folks, 3D printed guns apparently were not meant to be fired this many times in a row. Go figure. I learned something. So, Jim, obviously, he's still carrying around his little hand sickle that he picked up earlier. And where did he pick that up? Oh, he picked that. Shit, did I skip the basketball scene?
I think you did. I was just about to mention that because I don't even remember you talking about that now that you say that.
Oh, you're right. I didn't even bring that up. I mean, you know what? I'm not even going to bring it up. On the off chance that someone's still listening to us and hasn't seen the movie yet, I'm going to let you experience the basketball court scene on your own.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good thing because I actually kind of like what they do with that.
Yes,
let the guy in the tidy whities be a fun little surprise. I'll just dangle that little carrot out there.
There you go.
The guy in the tidy whities should be a nice little surprise. I mean, out of everything that goes on in here, let that be a little surprise. Because now that you say that, yeah, I don't even remember you bringing that up.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
So yeah,
I didn't remember mentioning that Jim picked up that sickle, and I think that's the scene where he did it. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. So the guy in the tidy whities, let that be a little surprise.
There you go. Enjoy.
Yeah, avoiding any details about it. I think that entire sequence pretty much encapsulates like everything about the situation that's going on, the way things, what you initially think when he shows up and how it ends up by the end of the scene. It's like, okay, now if we didn't know before with the subway scene, we definitely understand everything going on now.
And the scene is also great to kind of show that this virus has no rules. There's no, it's not like the infected are always attacking the uninfected. It's not like the infected are, always trying to kill. Sometimes they're trying to have sex. Sometimes they're just flat trying to have fun. Like they're not necessarily trying to kill or have sex. So yeah, I'm going to leave that scene untouched and you guys enjoy. It's definitely like something I've never seen in a zombie/infected movie. I've never seen a scene like that. So yeah, there you go. Enjoy. Anyway, back to our climax. Jim takes the sickle after the doctor's gun explodes. He takes the sickle, buries it in the doctor's neck, doesn't pull it out right away. Like he takes the time to kind of have a couple of one-liners, if you will. And then he pulls the sickle out of his neck, and we get that glorious blood spray, that arterial spray all over the place. And yeah, our doctor has now been dispatched, and we're left with Kat and Jim. At this point, Kat is still trying to get away. She's basically, a few yards ahead of Jim as he's chasing her through the hallways. She finally finds an entrance to the roof that has a locking gate behind it. The gate is open when she gets there, thankfully for her. She's able to get through the gate. She locks the gate behind her, and then Jim catches up, and they have basically their final scene together where Jim, once again, it's like a mix. You can see where these people still know who they are and know who the other person is, because this whole conversation is a mix of, I love you, I can't live without you, I'm gonna rip your tits off, I'm gonna rape the shit out of you. You know what I mean? It's like equal parts love and hate. And so it's, hence, again, the sadness. I fucking love the title of this movie. Amongst the million things about this movie I love, this title is spectacular. When you really think about what the infected are going through inside their head, the fact that they know what they're doing, they just can't stop. They have no inhibitions. You know, they're slaves to their baser instincts. So yeah. So like I said, Jim and Kat have their final conversation. Kat finally just says, I'm done. As she says her goodbye, and we see her start to go up the stairs towards the helipad where there should be a waiting helicopter waiting for her and the doctor. The camera then pans out to show Jim take his last breath. Of course, Jim dies with that fucking smile on his face and his completely black eyes, and the shot lingers on him too. I mean, if you think a quick shot of that is uncomfortable, a lingering shot's even worse. And what we hear in the background, while the camera is just kind of zoomed in on Jim, we hear Kat get up to the roof. She opens the door. You hear her yell for the helicopter, but then you hear gunshots. You hear like 4 or 5 gunshots and then silence. You don't hear from Kat again. So even though this movie doesn't make us watch it, at least they gave us a definitive ending to the story of Jim and Kat. You know, it's a small story within this bigger narrative of the virus that's basically taking over Taiwan. But, you know, we get that ending that at least gives us closure, whether you agree with the ending or not, whether you want to believe that maybe Kat wasn't shot or, you know, whatever the case may be. But yeah, that is the end of our film. And then we get that spectacular death metal song by Ashen, depending on how it's supposed to be pronounced. And
hey, let's talk about that ending really quick.
Yes.
So I watched it. I watched the movie a couple times, and the second time, I tried to pay attention to her and like between her running up the steps and when we start hearing the gunshots. So are we to take it as she gets up there and she actually turned and that's where they shot her, or she goes up there to get rescued and they just have orders to like shoot on sight, or is it ambiguous, or what do you think?
Shoot on sight. I'm thinking shoot on sight. I'm thinking
since the doctor, like it was because the doctor had called them for the ride and said that it was going to be him and another person. So when she comes out and there's no doctor,
okay.
Yeah, she comes out without the doctor. So it's like, is she infected? Like, I don't even think the helicopter folks, the helicopter crew even took the time to find out if she was infected or not. I think once they saw one person come through that door without the doctor, fuck it, shoot him and let's get out of here.
Yeah, because it was pretty quick.
Yeah,
that was my thing, was shoot on sight. Yeah, that was my thing.
It's sad. It sucks. You know, I mean, obviously we're cheering. You know, we're kind of cheering for Jim and Kat to get together. You know, they're not the most hateable couple in one of these horror movies. You know, one of these young in love couples. I had a little bit of problem with Jim and the whole vacation thing earlier in the film, but ultimately he does really make up for it. And even though, you know, he does end up getting infected, I still think it's a great story and a beautiful way to end this movie. You know, rather than just ending it on killing the businessman, the way certain people from Uruguay might have done, they give us that extra little bit of an epitaph. And ultimately, the virologist scene, I mean, you can make an argument that it's not even really all that necessary. I mean, they could have figured out a way through that, and potentially even just cut it out altogether. I mean, you could have cut it out, saved 5 to 10 minutes of runtime. But I don't hate the scene. I do agree with the people that say that it's kind of brings the movie to a halt. But I'm going to stand here and say I like that it brought the movie to a halt at that particular moment. Like I said, it gave me a chance to breathe. It gave me a chance to kind of soak in what I just witnessed. The fact that finally, a final girl takes out the big bad in just epic, angry fashion, you know? So, you know, I'm still kind of, you know, in a glow from this during the whole virologist scene anyway. So I'm very okay with the slower scene there. But.
Yeah, it's a necessary breather just because, you know, you've had such a high beforehand that if you took it out, you'd be just right back into the fray again, and then it would lose the emotional impact. I think that bringing it down gives it a chance to breathe and lets it have an impact, because if you just go straight from that into, you know, he grabs her, throws her in the decontam, you know, you see the baby scene, and then, you know, they try to escape, you know, you don't have a chance to be affected by, you know, her smashing the businessman. It gives it a chance to breathe, and it gives it a chance to have an impact. Yep. And I think that's what makes it work the most.
Absolutely. Perfectly said, my friend. Yeah. Just, all the pacing choices made throughout this movie, I appreciate. Every time we get a major scene of debauchery, we get a little bit of a lull. Not a major one. It's not like you have to deal with 5 to 10 minutes of a slow scene every single time, but it's just nice to, get a minute or two to just kind of, and really, it's not just to breathe, but to absorb what you just watched. Because sometimes, depending on who you are, a lot of the stuff in this movie is going to be shocking. It's going to be incredibly shocking. Obviously, for somebody like us, people like us who've been in the genre for a long time and have watched, the most depraved of the depraved, it may not be as shocking so much as just, glee inducing. That is a word that I've been using a lot with this film. And folks, listen, I genuinely hope that anybody still listening to my voice doesn't judge us harshly. I already talked about how some people, look at fans of certain movies. Please don't think that Don and I are just debaucherous, psychos that want to kill everything that moves. No, my friends, no. We watch these movies so that we don't do these things in real life. This is my release. This is when I watch a movie like The Sadness, all I'm picturing are like the shitty people that I work with getting just decimated, people in my family that I can, kind of live without. It just becomes this guilty. I hate to use the word guilty pleasure because the movie is legitimately good, but I still kind of look at it as a guilty pleasure because, who knows? If you don't, some people are going to think you're a little sadistic, and ultimately I'm okay with that title. I mean, I'm sure Don is the same way. I've seen movies way worse than The Sadness, way worse and more debaucherous than The Sadness. But none of those have the masterful filmmaking that we see in this film. The score, the cinematography, the great performances, all of it. This movie is a total package. And even though it may not be, and it definitely will not be, a 10 out of 10, an absolutely perfect film for all genre fans, I can say with full confidence, this is a near, I'm not even going to say near, this is a fucking perfect movie to me. I love every single minute of this movie. There's not a second of this movie that I dislike. And, I've watched it, like a half dozen to 10 times now, and it still brings me joy every time. And I'm sure this movie is going to bring me joy for years to come. So, yeah, the exuberant price that we paid for that German 4K Steelbook, I'm very okay with it because this movie is going to be a featured title in my collection for decades to come. Guys, shut me up because I'm going to keep talking for hours about this movie.
Yeah, for myself, speaking on what you just said, yeah, I've seen more depraved stuff than this. I mean, I've legitimately seen, stuff about people slicing their own digits off or, taking shits on screen. I mean, I've literally seen stuff like that. But the fact that you wrap what goes on in this movie, I mean, you heard it, a couple of hours ago. There's an there's an actual skull fucking that goes on in this, and it's not the most brutal thing that happens. You take that kind of impact and you take that kind of debauchery and sadistic, activity, but you wrap it up in a technical package that's probably, I would say, just as much as anything that, we got from Astor or Peele or, what's that other guy, Eggers. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that he's, in line with them yet, because we've actually seen their follow-up films. All three of them, we know what their follow-up film was after their debut. But you see the kind of package that this guy brought together, and he, dived as head first and headlong into this kind of gleeful, sadism and debauchery are just, perfect terms. He dived headlong into that, but wrapped it up in a masterclass of technical filmmaking. This guy won me over for life with one film, and I can't remember any other director since I've been a genre fan that's done that. I can't remember a time when I've seen a debut film that impacted me this much, where one viewing, I was almost ready to declare it in my top favorite films of all time. And it's legitimately gotten there on repeat viewings. Yeah, it's over the top in the best way possible with all of the, aspects and technicalities and anything that you want to say being, labeled a gore-hound, as you will. Yeah, there's enough of that in there to satisfy. But if you look beyond it, there's timely topical commentary on, the state of the world at large, living in a pandemic, living with a virus that we don't know what's going on with it, going to work and trying to, accommodate what's going on while, you've got these strange maniacs going around all over the place, spreading this disease to anyone that they come in contact with. It's topical, and yet there's also, far more than that. I mean, Mike brought up, tons of social commentary on, toxic masculinity, because, I mean, believe it or not, it's almost always men that get infected in here. I very rarely remember seeing a woman that got infected beyond the opening girl who, you saw her peel the guy's face off. Beyond that, I don't even remember there being a woman that was actually infected beyond, maybe a couple in the
orgy, yeah.
Yeah, the orgy scene, or a couple that are running random on the street. But all of the other main villains that we see here were men. So I would imagine, I mean, I'm not smart enough or tied into Taiwanese culture to speculate on what's being said there, but I would imagine there's something else in there that if there's anybody that knows more about it, let us know, because that's going to make this film sound even better to me, because a gore film as gleeful and as brutal and as goddamn beautiful to look at as this is, that has a brain with it, I don't know what else to say about that. I mean, this he's somebody to watch. And yeah, I'm going to follow you in saying, Mike, shut me up, because I could keep going.
The last thing I'm going to say about this, literally the last thing, I promise, Mike. I watched the trailer after watching the film. You guys know I don't watch trailers before the movie. There's literally a quote in the trailer that says, "This is the most violent and depraved zombie movie of all time." And guess what, folks? That's not hyperbole. 99 times out of 100, I would say you just wrote a check that movie will never be able to cash. My friends, this movie cashed that check. And whether you like it or you don't, you have to admit he went for it. He held back nothing. And ultimately, whether you love or hate this movie, you realize this is a moment in history. This is a moment in horror history. This is like a Serbian film. This is like Martyrs. When a movie comes out that just disturbs us this much and then turns off others, it's a moment. So my friends, enjoy it. I'm going to enjoy this moment for a long time. So yeah. Now, Mike, I'm going to mute my mic so that I have no temptation to keep talking.
I mean, I don't really have much to add. I think we've kind of said it all. I'm sure the movie won't be for everyone, as evidenced by I think it was the YouTube review Venom brought up. Yeah. But for those that do like this kind of movie, this is in the elite class of this style. So technically well done on every level. And for like a gore splatter movie, it still tends to have a pretty good story with a couple of main characters you care about. So there's plenty to like about this movie beyond even just the gore itself. Not to say that that's not like the highlight, because I do think the gore effects in this are excellent. Every time, like I said, there was probably some use of CGI just for extra blood splattering or spraying, but for the most part, it looked like a lot of practical effects, and they were very well done, something that will always get points from me. And now that it's on Shudder, I don't see why anyone wouldn't want to check it out. Mm-hmm. So I guess that's it for me.
Oh, man. Okay. I need a cigarette.
Well, I guess as a cool down, we can mention where else we can be heard. We're talking about movies that probably we don't love quite as much as this lately, but
let's see. For me, we did record the main show this past weekend, episode 45, where we looked at my picks, which were spring break horror movies. We looked at The Ruins from 2008. and Atrocious from 2010, which is a Spanish found footage film, horror film. So I wanted to do something that was kind of known by the masses and maybe another one that wasn't as known. So that should be out fairly soon after you hear this episode, I would imagine within a day or two. So check that out. And Creature Comforts, No More Room in Hell presents Creature Comforts. We'll be recording episode 9 this coming Sunday. We are going to look at Cloverfield. Yes, the found footage creature feature that actually was nominated for some Oscars, effects Oscars, if I remember correctly, but still an Oscar, nominated movie. So that's pretty heavy for Creature Comforts. There you go. So that'll be the next episode of Creature Comforts. I would say look for that episode to be out towards the end of the month. I'm not the fastest with editing episodes quite yet. I'm still learning, folks. Give me some time. But yeah, before the end of the month, we'll actually have the May episode out in the calendar month of May. So woo! And that's it for me, folks.
All right, Don, how about you?
Yeah, as I mentioned last week, the guest spot from House That Screams podcast is still out there. It was a look at the original Suspiria, which was a lot of fun. But other than that, the only other one is the latest episode of the Horror Countdown, where I was joined by Venom's friend Rebecca Reinhardt to look at our favorite 1980s one-shot slasher movies.
That's a great list for her.
Yeah, we talked about it on the show that this was pretty much almost all done as soon as we agreed what the conversation was. As soon as we agreed to set a recording date together and set the topic, I think we both almost had our list planned out, and it was just a matter of not just sorting everything but ranking everything. We were both able, I think we both said that we had like around 20 titles each pretty soon after the topic was agreed upon. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. We we were able to have some crossovers and a couple of surprising choices, but yeah, it was a lot of fun. And if you heard her on her show, you know what she brings with the genre. So go ahead and check that one out. Other than that, I don't have anything other than upcoming recordings for my show. So yeah, pretty dry on my ends.
Okay. As far as I go, I'm not going to be recording much. I'm going to be editing this and the main show. So that's going to be the rest of my week. And yeah, so I got my plate full with other stuff other than being on podcasts. So that's it. Next episode, I know we have a couple choices because the new Firestarter came out this week. That's always an option, but Hatching also hit VOD. So
I'd rather go with Hatching just because I've heard better things about it, but it's up to you guys.
I mean, I would lean towards Hatching too.
Yeah, I mean, you guys know I already saw Hatching and kind of gave my thoughts on the main show, so I'll keep hush hush on that. But I'm still gonna watch Firestarter this week and just to see. I'm too curious, so. I'll
end up watching it regardless. It's like, I think when I was originally setting up the schedule, I thought that was going to be like the movie for the week, but now I'm like, oh wait, there's actually options. And it's not like I'm picking just some random thing I'm trying to look for. Like Hatching is actually something I was looking forward to too, and I wasn't able to see it in the theater, so I am pretty like looking forward to watching it.
Quick watch, 90 minutes, awesome.
Yeah, it was kind of weird that they kind of put everything together kind of close like that. So, I mean, for somebody like us, you had like 5 or 6 films drop around the same time. But I'm one voice. I would lean towards Hatching, but I still am curious about Firestarter. Just I don't know about you guys, but I'm just curious to see what they do with it because I've seen the original once, and I don't remember like anything. All I remember is it being Drew Barrymore and the other guy being Keith David. The white guy, no, David Keith. Damn it, I did it again.
There you go. I was gonna say.
I did it again. Yeah, I did it again. The white one, David Keith. See, I can't even remember the cast in the original, so that's how much it affected.
Oh, hey, my favorite actor ever is in that movie, Mr. George C. Scott. So anything with him in it, I'm on board.
Yeah, Rainbow, right? Or Reinhardt?
Yeah.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a
He's
while for
there,
me.
and
Yeah,
him and Martin Sheen's. Martin Sheen's awesome as well.
Easy?
Yeah, he's one of the villains, yeah.
Oh crap!
Yeah, he kind of
I don't remember.
he's kind of like a tweener character, and then he switches over to like full on villain at one point.
Exactly. Yeah, he does the wolf
okay.
in sheep's clothing thing.
Yeah, like I said, all I remember is Drew Barrymore, David Keith, apparently now. Oh, and Heather Locklear, yeah. So yeah, I'm she gets her what 10 minutes of filming. Yeah, so
that's all she needs.
I'm definitely due to give that one a rewatch. But I mean, if you guys are settled on the hatching, I'm fine with that because I'm also been curious about it. Just word of mouth, and I can't lie, that premise has me just damn intrigued.
Absolutely.
Like it's one of the weird ones where I'm kind of just curious to see how they're going to pull the premise off. But I mean, it's my voice against you guys. I mean, if you guys are up to do it, I'm game. So.
The only other issue is that Men opens this Friday as well.
Oh yeah,
or if you want to,
the new A24 film, yeah, which I'm sure Don is very excited for.
Well, if that's the case, then I think we can just schedule the next 2 weeks with Hatching and then Men.
Unless something comes out the last week, but I don't think so.
There is a horror movie coming out. It's either the last week of May or the first week of June, but it's not like a franchise. It's like a brand new movie I've never heard of. It's got like a really generic title. Damn it, I can't think of it now. Like Watcher or something like that. The Watcher or something like that. But yeah, I mean, I read about it and it said it's supposed to get a theatrical release in late May, early June. So who knows?
Well, if that's still the case, I'd still rather go Hatching than Men.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I'm very down.
Not that I'm trying to
maybe we'll just if any of us watch Firestarter this week, we'll do a little side review, a little quickie. I loved it or I hated it.
That's fine. Yeah.
There you go.
All right.
But
cool.
not that I'm trying to program 2 weeks worth of shows, but I would be more comfortable with that setup.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, so listeners, you're gonna get some combination of the movies we just talked about.
Yeah,
I think obviously A24's Men is a guarantee. It's in the theater, and well, so we're gonna see that, and then we'll figure out the next one. I'm thinking it's gonna be Hatching, but I just won't make it 100% at this point.
Yeah.
So that's gonna wrap it up for this episode of Fresh Cuts. Thank you everybody for listening. We will be back in less than a week since I'm getting this one out a little later into the week. So thank you, and we will catch you then. So let's say bye to the listeners.
Later.
Adios, folks. And don't forget, this is my kiss. I'm kissing you to death.
Peace.